I thought I was flying to Los Angeles to surprise my daughter, but I found her fighting for her life in intensive care while her husband partied on a luxury yacht. How does the man who promised to protect her vanish when she needs him most? And how, by nightfall, does he end up with nothing? Before we go on, tell us where you're watching from. If these stories speak to you, subscribe. Tomorrow brings another you won't want to miss. The plane touched down, and my heart wrote the reunion I'd been dreaming about. Laughter, long hugs, the kind of joy that erases time. Hours later, I was in the ICU. Cold air. Soft beeps. My daughter, Matilda, pale and shaking, her hand barely holding mine. Where was her husband? Not at the hospital. Not with the kids. Not anywhere a decent man would be. He was out on the Pacific, raising a glass on a rented yacht, burning through money that wasn't his, my money. I'd given him that access out of trust. He turned it into fuel for parties while my daughter faded. By nightfall, that lifeline would be cut. Every card, every transfer, every door he'd been walking through on my dime. This isn't only a story about betrayal. It's about a father reclaiming dignity and a family learning how to stand together when cruelty tries to tear them apart. I grew up believing steady work could mend almost anything that cracked, and for most of my life, that rule held true. My name is Harley Sims. I spent 4 decades as a Texas engineer, the kind of man who keeps a notebook in his pocket, who measures twice, who tightens the last bolt by feel because hands learn what eyes sometimes miss. Martha used to tease that I could hear a loose screw the way a musician hears a flat note. We built a small life that felt big because it was honest. A porch that faced the evening breeze. A kitchen that smelled like coffee and cornbread. A calendar filled with ordinary tasks done well. When you stack enough good ordinary days together, you get something that feels like home. When Martha died, the quiet did not arrive all at once. It seeped in, day by day, into the space where her laughter should have lived. I kept the porch swing oiled so it wouldn't complain to no one. I kept her recipe cards in a tin near the stove and made her cornbread every other Friday. Not because I wanted cornbread, but because I wanted proof I could still follow her handwriting to something warm. The habits held me together like rivets along a beam. I wore my wedding band at night because that was when loneliness pressed down. Work lists and small rituals kept the roof steady over a house that suddenly echoed. Matilda called often at first. We would talk about the kids and the weather and whether the fig tree had finally decided to be generous. She sent photos because that is how people hand each other moments now. Emma missing a front tooth, holding a sign with first-grade letters full of crooked pride. Jack with marker on his cheeks like war paint, announcing that he was the strongest in his class. I learned to bless pictures the way my mother blessed bread. I would touch the screen with 2 fingers and say their names out loud, as if sound could shrink the miles. Then I would put the phone face down and sit very still until the ache settled. 3 years passed without a visit, not because love thinned, but because life sharpened. Phone calls full of updates and apologies. One winter, I caught the flu, and the next spring she caught deadlines. Then the price of flights jumped, and my savings did what savings do when a man retires and forgets that prices never retire with him. There was always a good reason, and also a quiet truth. Grief made me smaller, and pride does not ask for help. The photograph in my wallet took on the work of a window. In it, Matilda stood in her kitchen dusted with flour, Emma grinning without a front tooth, Jack holding up a crayon masterpiece. I held that picture so often it turned soft at the edges. Every time I refolded that picture, I made the same set of promises. Be there for birthdays again. Fix the wobbly dining chair the next time I visit. Teach Emma the trick for cutting an apple around the core with 1 turn of the wrist. Take Jack to the hardware store and let him pick a pocket tape measure of his own. Small vows, the kind that knit a family back together. When I could not sleep, I stood at the window and practiced the conversation I owed Matilda. I am sorry for waiting. I am sorry the years stacked up on us. I want to come now. I will come now. The night would hold those words and ask, when? Work remained my ballast even after retirement. Even when the railroad no longer wrote my schedule, the engineer in me stayed on the clock. I rose before sunrise. I kept a calendar with boxes checked in pencil, oil change done, gutter cleared. Call Matilda. Tuesday evening. On the kitchen wall, I hung a pegboard with labeled hooks for tools and a small shelf for the things I wanted to hand the children when they were old enough to help. A level with a bubble that never lied. A stubby screwdriver for tight quarters. A folding rule that clicks when it opens. I wanted them to know that careful hands can turn worry into order. Martha believed holidays were less about the date and more about whether you set a longer table. On Thanksgiving, she invited anyone who had nowhere to go. On Christmas, she insisted we deliver cookies to the night shift at the gas station. The year before she passed, she made me promise 3 things. Keep the door unlocked for people who need you. Never let anger be the loudest voice in the room. Remember that joy requires planning. I wrote those down and taped them inside the pantry door. On lonely nights, I read them like instructions. They steadied me. They sounded like her. I tried to keep the house ready for company, as if readiness alone might tug my people home. I kept spare toothbrushes in the cabinet and clean sheets folded tight on the top. Shelf, I stocked the freezer with vanilla ice cream because Emma once declared that chocolate was too serious. Jack liked to stack coins and ask their dates, so I kept a jar on the coffee table with quarters from different years. I swept the porch and wiped the swing chains with oil until they stopped complaining. Little altars to everyday joy, waiting for small hands and loud footsteps. My hands wanted to build a welcome, so I went to the garage and started a project I had no reason to rush. A small jewelry box, cedar inside so it would carry a clean smell. Walnut outside because walnut ages into the kind of brown that makes you think of library shelves and old vows. I cut dovetails by hand, not because a jig could not do it cleaner, but because slow work is a kind of prayer. I inlaid a thin strip of maple on the lid and sanded until the seams felt like one piece. Under the lid, I set a small brass hinge that moved like a whisper. When I pressed the top closed, the box answered with a soft click that sounded like a promise kept. I rehearsed the trip a dozen ways. Sometimes I would call ahead and say surprise without the suspense, give her the flight number, ask what groceries to bring, and let anticipation be a bridge we walked together. Other times I pictured walking up her path with that box under my arm, pressing the doorbell, hearing the scramble and the shout and the sound of feet running. In those daydreams, the house smelled like cinnamon, and someone had drawn pictures on the fridge with weak magnets barely holding on. I would set the box on the counter and say, "Open it, honey," and watch her face travel through years in 3 seconds. 3 years is a long time in a child's life. Kids grow by miles while adults move by inches. I kept a list of the jokes that used to work and crossed some out because they belonged to an age that had already passed. I practiced new ones in the mirror and felt foolish and kept practicing anyway. I bought a sheet of planet stickers for Emma's notebooks and a small plastic model of a truss bridge for Jack because it could teach the lesson I gave every apprentice. Everything carries weight, and everything distributes weight. Build with that in mind, and you will sleep better. My friends at the diner asked why I did not just book the flight months earlier. I told them money, or the lawn, or the church project, or the fundraiser I'd promised to help. Truth sat beside all those words like a quiet friend. After Martha died, I became cautious around joy. It felt fragile, like something you should not touch without gloves. Grief rearranges furniture inside you. You learn new paths in the dark. You learn that hope can be shy, and yet you still set a place for it. I kept setting that place. The chair stayed empty, and I kept setting it anyway. On the morning I decided, Texas light came in, clean through the blinds. I made coffee, burned the first batch of toast, laughed, made another, and put the burned slice in a bag for the birds. I called the airline and booked a seat near the wing, the way I always do. I told Mrs. Martinez next door to keep an eye on the porch in case a package came. I sharpened the mower blades as a way to keep my hands from shaking. Later, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down the little things I wanted to remember when I arrived. Ask what time the kids wake, learn the route to school, find the park with the good swings. That night, I pulled the jewelry box from the bench and lined it with a square of Martha's cotton dress, the blue one with tiny white dots that looked like a night sky. I did not cut the fabric. I folded it so no thread would be lost. I placed the ring in the center and shut the lid, then opened it again because the smell of cedar felt like a door opening. I imagined Matilda lifting the lid and catching that scent and knowing it was the smell of home. I imagined her telling Emma what it meant to hold something that once lived on her grandmother's hand. When I bought the ticket, I also bought a new shirt because the one Martha liked best had grown thin at the collar. I chose navy because it hides coffee and pairs with anything, and because the salesman said navy makes a man look like he knows where he is going. I polished my shoes and put fresh wiper blades on the truck for the drive to the airport, even though I would leave the truck in a lot and ride a shuttle. Rituals matter. They build a runway under you when your heart is taking off. I set the alarm early and laid the shirt across a chair like a flag of intent. I thought about what I owed Matilda. Not money, not advice delivered like a verdict, but presence. To make space for her words, even the hard ones. To hold the kids so she could shower. To clean the sink 15 times if needed. To take night turns with fevers so she could sleep. When you miss years, you repay them in hours. One dish washed at a time. One school pickup at a time. One story read all the way to the end without glancing at the phone. I wrote these on an index card, not because I would forget, but because saying something on paper makes it easier to say it out loud. I also made a plan for my own heart. I would not rewrite the past to punish myself. I would say Martha's name at the table so memory stayed a guest instead of a ghost. I would let the children ask about their grandmother and answer with stories that held laughter. I would not try to fix what feelings refuse to hurry. You cannot tighten grief with a wrench. You can only sit near it and wait for the threads to catch again. If tears came, I would let them come, and then keep working. Work, I trust. Work gives sorrow a handle. The morning I left, I tucked Martha's photograph into my breast pocket. The one from our 30th anniversary when she wore a red scarf and made me take 6 pictures before we finally got one where neither of us blinked. I placed the jewelry box in my carry-on, wrapped in an old dish towel. I locked the front door and touched the frame, because habit is a kind of prayer. At the end of the driveway, I looked back at the house and pictured it with porch lights on, waiting to welcome us home, when the visit turned into a ritual. Then I drove toward the airport with the old ache riding shotgun and a new hope buckled in. All the way to the gate, I practiced the first line I would say to Matilda. Not I am sorry, though I was. Not I should have come sooner, though I should have. I settled on something Martha would have chosen. I missed you, and I am here now. Then I would hand her the box and let the cedar speak for me. Then I would roll up my sleeves and ask for a list, a grocery list, a fix list, a list of things that would make her life 20% easier before dinner. Love, I have learned, is work you are grateful to do. By the time I stood in the boarding line, the ache that had lived under my ribs for years felt less like a wound and more like a doorway. I could step through it with my hands full of small gifts and leave the old delay on the far side. The agent scanned my ticket. I took a breath that tasted like coffee and promise and walked down the jetway, thinking about a hug. Hugs do not fix everything, but they begin many good repairs. The tires kissed the runway with a shudder that rattled my seat, and the plane slowed to a crawl through the sprawl of Los Angeles International Airport. I gripped the armrests with hands that had turned clammy. My stomach felt tight, not from turbulence, but from anticipation. 3 years of promises and photographs, 3 years of voices carried through wires had all led to this moment. I whispered to myself that the surprise would be worth every mile. My heart drummed in my chest as I thought about the look on Matilda's face when she opened the door and saw her old dad standing there. The flight attendants wished us safe travels. I rose, stiff in the knees, and joined the shuffle down the narrow aisle. My overnight bag felt heavier than its weight, as if it carried all those missing years alongside the cedar box hidden within. The California air rushed at me as I stepped outside, warm and scented with jet fuel. I paused to steady myself before following the stream of passengers toward the taxi stand. A driver held up a sign with no names, just the words, "Free now," and waved me over. I gave him the address in Studio City, the one Matilda had texted me months earlier, and he nodded. The cab eased into traffic, swallowed by the endless tide of cars. Palm trees lined the horizon like markers of another world. I told the driver I was surprising my daughter after 3 years apart. He smiled in the mirror and said, "Surprise visits are the best kind." I forced a grin, trying to believe it. My thumb hovered over Matilda's name in my phone, but I stopped myself. The whole point was to walk through her front door without warning. That first hug needed to be real, not softened by a call. The city blurred past. Billboards, overpasses, neon signs already buzzing, even though the sun had not yet given up. My chest filled with both hope and unease. I remembered Martha's words when Matilda first moved to California. She said big cities look like promises, but sometimes hide loneliness. I pushed the thought away and leaned into the fantasy of reunion. The ride stretched, every red light reminding me how close I was and how far. When the driver finally turned onto her street, my breath caught. Small houses with gardens lined the block, sunlight slanting across tidy lawns. Children's bikes leaned against fences, dogs barked in the distance, life hummed normally everywhere. Then the cab stopped in front of Matilda's home, and something did not fit. I stepped onto the sidewalk with the jewelry box secure in my bag and looked at the house. The white shutters were closed tight. The rose bush beneath the window drooped with brown edges, petals scattered across the walkway like confetti from a celebration that had ended long ago. I remembered the pictures she used to send me of those roses, boasting about their color, bright against the stucco. Now they looked forgotten. My boots crunched over dry leaves as I walked up the path. The mailbox bulged, envelopes stuffed so full they spilled onto the ground. I bent down and picked up a stack. Bills with due dates weeks old, advertisements curling in the sun, and a package addressed to Gary that had been sitting long enough to fade. A wave of unease crawled up my spine. I pressed the doorbell, waited, and listened. The chime echoed inside the house, clear then hollow. Silence followed. I pressed again, longer this time, imagining footsteps rushing to answer, children calling out, maybe a dog barking. Nothing. The house stayed still. I knocked, my voice trembling as I called out her name. "Matilda, it's Dad." The word Dad hung in the quiet air, unanswered. I pressed my forehead to the cool wood of the door, trying to hear movement inside. My breath fogged against the surface. Nothing but silence. I circled around the side gate, peering through slats into the backyard. Patio furniture sat coated in dust, untouched. The small vegetable patch that once yielded tomatoes lay barren, stems brittle and brown. A child's tricycle rested on its side near the back steps, one wheel lazily spinning in the breeze. No laughter, no voices, just the faint rustle of dry leaves. I returned to the front porch, pulse hammering now. My engineer's instinct whispered that when systems stop moving, something has failed. I could not yet name the failure, but I felt it. My phone trembled in my hand as I dialed Matilda's number. 1 ring, 2, 3, straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice chirped cheerfully. A voice that belonged to a woman who was not lying silent somewhere. I tried again, this time listening to the rings with a rising panic. Again, voicemail. I told myself the battery might be dead. The ringer silenced. Logical explanations, the kind I had always trusted. Yet logic did not still the thudding in my chest. I scrolled to Gary's number and pressed. 4 rings, then voicemail. His voice, smug even in recording, invited a message. I hung up without leaving one. I sat heavily on the step, clutching the jewelry box inside my bag. The warmth of anticipation drained into cold dread. Across the hedge, a voice startled me. I looked up to see an elderly woman in a sun hat, garden shears in her hands. She asked if I was looking for the McCoys. I nodded, forcing a polite smile. I told her I was Matilda's father, just arrived. She frowned slightly, tilting her head. "Come to think of it," she said, "it's been awfully quiet over there." She usually heard the children in the mornings, but not lately. I tried to mask the fear creeping into my expression, mumbling that maybe they were on vacation. She looked unconvinced, then offered a kind wish and returned to trimming her plants. Her words clung to me like a shadow. Quiet. No children playing, no voices. I looked at the house again, really looked. Curtains drawn tight, not a sliver of movement. Toys frozen in place. A mailbox that told the story of days passing unattended. My throat tightened. I dialed Matilda again, more desperate this time, letting it ring until the voicemail cut in. I left a message, my voice strained. "Honey, it's Dad. I'm at the house. Where are you? Please call me." I hung up and immediately called again. No answer. The sun began to slip lower, casting long shadows across the street. Neighbors went about their routines, cars pulling into driveways, porch lights flicking on, while I sat trapped in the stillness of my daughter's abandoned home. I ran my hand along the rough grain of the porch railing, grounding myself, but my mind raced. Something was wrong. The garden, the mailbox, the silence. They were pieces of a puzzle forming a picture I did not want to see. My heart pounded against the certainty that my surprise reunion had turned into something else entirely, something darker. I rose and pressed my face against the living room window, cupping my hands to block the glare. Inside, I saw dim outlines, Matilda's art easel in the corner, Jack's toy cars scattered on the coffee table. No movement, no light. Dust filmed the glass, muting the view. It looked like a stage where life had been paused mid-scene. I stepped back, unease settling deeper. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I stared at it, waiting for it to light up, for her name to appear, for any sign that the silence was temporary. But the screen stayed dark, the house stayed quiet, and the dread inside me grew until it filled every breath. At that moment, I knew with cold certainty that the story I thought I had written, the story of a surprise visit, of hugs and laughter, was not the story waiting for me. Something had cracked, and I was standing in the middle of it, clutching a gift meant for joy, staring at a house that whispered only absence. The phone was still in my hand when the screen lit with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I thought it might be Matilda finally returning my calls. I pressed accept, my voice shaky with both hope and fear. Instead, a calm, professional tone came through the line. He introduced himself as Dr. Rivera from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. My heart dropped into my stomach. He asked if I was Harley Sims, Matilda's father. I managed to say yes, though my throat had gone dry. Then came the words that split my world in two. "Your daughter is in our intensive care unit. Her condition is critical. You should come immediately." I gripped the porch railing as if the wood itself might hold me upright. Critical. Intensive care. I stammered, asking how, why, when. The doctor spoke with careful pauses, explaining that Matilda had been under their care for weeks, battling advanced cancer. My ears rang, as though the world had been swallowed in static. Cancer? I remembered her voice on the phone months ago, telling me she was just tired. Just tired. My knees nearly buckled. The jewelry box slipped from my lap to the steps, landing with a hollow thud. Somehow, I found a taxi, pressed the hospital address into the driver's hands, and told him to go fast. The city swirled past in streaks of neon and headlights, but I saw none of it. I clutched that worn photograph of Matilda and the kids, the one that had lived in my wallet for years, and whispered her name like a prayer. My chest ached with a father's worst fear, that I might already be too late. The hospital loomed like a fortress of glass and steel, sterile and unwelcoming. Automatic doors slid open to a lobby glowing with two bright lights. Families clutched one another in corners, hushed voices carried across the polished floor, and wheelchairs rolled by with hurried footsteps chasing behind. The antiseptic smell hit me first, a cold blend of chemicals that burned the inside of my nose. I signed my name at the desk with trembling hands, the pen nearly slipping. They gave me a visitor's badge and told me to take the elevator to the 7th floor. Each floor the elevator passed felt like a countdown. My reflection in the stainless steel walls looked like a stranger. Lined face, gray hair, eyes wide with dread. When the doors opened, the sounds changed. Beeping monitors, muffled conversations between nurses, the hum of machines working to keep fragile lives tethered. I followed Dr. Rivera down a corridor lined with rooms, each one holding its own tragedy, its own fight. In one, I glimpsed a young mother reading to a child with a bald head. In another, an elderly man holding his wife's hand. Finally, we reached room 712. The doctor warned me gently that her illness had taken a toll on her body. I nodded, though my chest squeezed so tight I thought I might not breathe again. He pushed open the door, and I stepped inside. The sight shattered me. Matilda lay in the hospital bed, her body thin and frail, her skin pale against the white sheets. Clear tubes fed into her arms, and monitors traced every beat of her heart in glowing green lines. The woman who once danced barefoot in her kitchen now looked like a shadow, fragile as glass. But when her eyes fluttered open and met mine, they lit with something I recognized instantly. Love. She smiled, weak but real, and whispered one word that broke me completely. Daddy. I crossed the room in 3 steps, afraid she might vanish if I moved too slowly. I gathered her hand into mine, shocked by how cold it felt, as though warmth had abandoned her. Tears blurred my vision until I could hardly see her face. Sweetheart, I choked out, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Her fingers trembled as they gripped mine. She whispered that she had wanted to tell me, but she didn't want to burden me while I was still grieving Mom. She thought she could handle it, thought she could protect me from the pain. My throat burned. Protect me? You're the one lying here fighting for your life. How could I not know? Her eyes shimmered with tears, and she whispered, I didn't want you to see me like this. I wanted to call you when I was better, when I had good news. Her voice cracked as she admitted the truth. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe less. She'd hidden the diagnosis for weeks, then months, telling herself it was temporary, that she'd beat it quietly and surprise me with remission instead of despair. I pressed my forehead against her hand, grief coursing through me like fire. You should never have fought this alone, I said. Never. My voice shook with both anger and shame. I should have been here. I should have known her smile returned, faint but radiant, as if to soothe me even as she lay there so fragile. But you're here now, Dad, she whispered, and that's all that matters. Her words, gentle and forgiving, pierced me deeper than any reproach. The beeping of the monitors filled the silence between us, steady and relentless. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand as if by sheer will I could keep her tethered to this world. Every line of her face, every flicker of her eyelids, every fragile breath carved itself into my heart. In that moment, I made a vow, not to her husband, not to the doctors, but to her. I would not leave her side again. I smoothed the blanket over her shoulders, the same way I used to tuck her in when she was a child, and whispered, "Rest, sweetheart. I'll keep watch." She closed her eyes, a faint smile still lingering, and her breathing slowed into shallow sleep. I sat in that chair, listening to the rhythmic beeps and the hiss of machines, my hand still wrapped around hers. The weight of guilt pressed heavy on me, but under it, something stronger took root. Resolve. That night in the intensive care unit, surrounded by antiseptic smells and the soft symphony of fragile lives, understood what had to be done. My daughter's fight was now my fight, and anyone who had abandoned her in this battle would face me. Matilda drifted back to sleep with her hand inside mine, the monitors tapping a steady line above us. I watched the rise and fall of her chest until the nurse finished a check and dimmed the light. When the room settled, she opened her eyes and tried to smile. I asked where Gary was. She looked at the ceiling and said he was busy with work meetings. He would come by later, she said, the way people repeat a promise they do not control. The phrase did not match the room. It did not match IV poles, plastic bracelets, or the hollows beneath her eyes. I kept my voice even. "Has he stayed overnight at all?" She shook her head. "He has a lot going on, Dad. Clients, presentations." I heard the apology hiding inside those words, as if his absence were her fault, as if illness needed permission from a calendar. I smoothed the blanket and said nothing. She needed rest more than debate. When she drifted into shallow sleep again, I stepped into the hallway and called him. The first call rang twice and went to voicemail. I left a clear message. "Gary, this is Harley. I am with Matilda in intensive care. Call me immediately." I called again a minute later. Voicemail again. I tried a third time, then a fourth. No answer. I texted him the room number and Dr. Rivera's name. I sent only facts. No anger, because facts are harder to ignore. I walked to the family lounge with a window over Los Angeles blinking to life. I called again, letting the ring cycle to the recorded greeting. The chirpy tone of his voicemail felt obscene against ICU beeps. I hung up and stared at my hands until their shaking slowed. Then I picked up Matilda's phone from the tray table. She had left Instagram open. At the top, his profile circle glowed with the red trace that marks a new story. I tapped it. The first image loaded with buttery light, polished teak deck, sunglasses beside a sparkling flute. The ocean stretched behind it like a blue runway. A caption floated over the frame, cocky, "Best life." I felt the floor tilt. I swiped and the sound came on, bass and laughter and wind. I swiped again. Gary grinned into the camera with two men I did not recognize. Another swipe. Another toast, another shot of a white wake. He dove from the stern, surfaced laughing, and someone off camera cheered. A timestamp read 90 minutes ago. Location tag, Marina del Rey. My thumb hovered above the glass. I wanted to throw the phone. Instead, I took screenshots. Every image, every caption, every tag. I opened his profile and scanned the highlight reels. Clubs, rooftops, hotel beds lined with shopping bags, a parade of rooms where nobody wears hospital bracelets. I sent one more text to his number from my phone. "Your wife is in intensive care. Call me." Then I sent a second from hers. "I see your stories. Her dad is here. Call." 3 dots appeared and vanished. When anger threatens to become noise, I go to numbers. Numbers do not lie. I opened my banking app and navigated to the backup savings account I had opened 2 years earlier. I had given Gary access during a season that felt like emergency. The ledger did not show a bridge. It showed a highway. Yacht charter, Marina del Rey, $15,000, posted yesterday. New Malibu, $850. Beverly Hills car service, $2,400. A scatter of charges bloomed down the page like an infection. I scrolled. Rodeo Drive boutiques, a private club fee, 2 dinners that cost more than a month of groceries. Dates lined up against the timeline of Matilda's treatments like a cruel mirror. While she sat through chemo, he signed slips for champagne. While she faced scans, he paid for a driver. I captured screenshots of everything: transaction IDs, timestamps, merchant names. I wrote a neat list in the notebook I carry, facts in order like bolts on a workbench. The math drew a clean picture of contempt. He had been taking from me to live above his means while my daughter counted breaths between waves of nausea. The last entry stabbed the page. Yacht charter hold, pending, another 15,000. I stared at pending and felt my anger harden into purpose. I went back to Matilda's bedside and sat where she could see me if she woke. I held her hand and counted her pulse with my thumb. She opened her eyes and tried to smile. "You look tired, Dad." I brushed her hair back and asked if she needed water. After a sip, she said the words again, softer now. "Gary has a lot of work meetings." I kept my voice steady. "He does not have any meeting that matters more than you. Rest. I am here." Her eyes searched my face. I told her I had been trying to reach him and that I would handle it. She nodded and let her eyes close, relief moving across her features like a blanket. When she slept again, I called his number one more time, straight to voicemail. I left a final message built for court if it came to that. "Gary, this is Harley. I have questions about charges on an account I control. Call now." I returned to the lounge and set the screenshots in order. Photos, charges, times, locations. I sent a short message from Matilda's phone. "Your stories show Marina Del Rey at 4:20. My bank shows a yacht charge posted yesterday. Call me now." For a long minute, nothing happened. Then a reply arrived. "Busy." I looked at the word until it lost meaning. Busy is a calendar block. Busy is not what you say when your wife lies in intensive care and her father is at her side. I replied with one sentence. "The charge is my money." He did not answer. I pictured him on deck, music swelling, a friend handing another glass, his thumb hovering, choosing silence over accountability. I opened the bank app again and checked the permissions I had granted. They were still in place. I revised alerts so any attempt would ping my phone and closed every screen. The nurse said I could stay through the fee. Night. Near midnight, Matilda woke lucid and steady. She asked if I had reached him. I told her no, but I had enough answers to act. She said she did not want him near the children if he chose that life. I told her I heard her. She fell asleep with her hand warm in mine, heartbeat stronger under my thumb. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. A pending hold converted to a charge attempt. The yacht company tried to finalize a second payment. Denied. I had moved funds out of reach minutes earlier. He would learn what empty feels like when the party lights turned from gold to red. I rested my head against the chair, still holding my daughter's hand, ready for morning and the cuts to come. The cafeteria pretended at normal while the hospital did its real work. Lights hummed, trays clicked, tired voices skimmed the air. I chose a corner with sightlines to the chapel, set my phone and notebook down, and opened the screenshots I had pulled from Matilda's feed. Gary's yacht smile filled the screen, champagne lifted, ocean burning behind him. I cropped, saved, noted the timestamp and geotag, and wrote a clean caption in my notebook. Evidence begins with clarity, not heat. When the photos were secured, I opened the banking app. Charges stacked by date like rivets on a beam. I scrolled to the month he first gained access and wrote the opening balance. I wrote the ending balance for each month after. Subtraction tells the story no one wants told. Fine dining on the same night, Dr. Rivera charted an infusion. Luxury car service during a neutropenic admission. Boutique shopping. The weak hair started to fall. Then the big one, Marina Del Rey, yacht charter. I screenshot the ledger page, circled the merchant, and wrote the authorization code beside it. A nurse in navy scrubs sat behind me with soup and a roll. I lowered the phone volume and kept working. I checked which cards carried his email, which addresses linked to him, which devices had logged in lately. The notebook filled with verbs that move systems: revoke, cancel, transfer, notify. I drafted a one-paragraph summary for a judge or social worker who would have 60 seconds to care. On these dates, while my daughter received treatment, the authorized user spent funds on non-essential luxury purchases. I attached the receipts and wrote C exhibits because precision also respects time. I dialed the bank's emergency line and gave every identifier they requested. The representative confirmed Gary's authorized user status on the backup savings and 2 credit cards. I tightened my voice to the torque of specification. Revoke all his access effective now. Remove his credentials from every card and sub-account. Transfer the remaining balance to my primary secured account. Add a note that reinstatement requires in-person verification with government ID by me only. The representative read it back slowly. I initialed the sentence in my notebook like an inspection line item and said, "Proceed." Hold music threaded the edges while the cafeteria clock counted seconds. A security officer traded a quiet joke with a custodian. My phone vibrated with a string of emails, each one a switch snapping off. Authorized access revoked. Card ending in 41 canceled. Card ending in 88 canceled. Savings transfer initiated. Fraud alerts armed. The representative returned and summarized the changes, then stayed on the line while I confirmed them in the app. I thanked her and ended the call. Something in my chest loosened without losing strength. I refreshed the balances and watched the transfer settle where it belonged. A pending hotel authorization hit the canceled card and failed. A second attempt at the charter company failed too. Another email chimed. Declined. I pictured him at a bar, polishing his story for strangers, when the server's terminal flashed red. No gloating, only the quiet click of a system doing its job. Consequences sound like that. I arranged the evidence into 3 sections anyone could read at a glance. Section 1. Social media. Each image printed with location and time. Section 2. Transactions. Merchant, amount, authorization code, account identifier linking it to me. Section 3. Medical context. A short timeline sourced to unit notes. No private detail beyond dates of admission and infusion. I wrote a 1-page summary that braided the 3 strands into a single rope, then clipped a binder clip at the top because tidy signals credibility before the first sentence is scanned. Between tasks, the sentence kept surfacing. He used my money to betray her. I let it sit without ornament until it hardened into a rail that could carry weight. I drew a full timeline across 2 notebook pages, months along the top, categories down the side, posts, charges, hospital events, calls unanswered, pencil first, pen when the line held. I added names for tomorrow, unit clerk for policies, social worker for a care letter, security for visitor rules, legal clinic downtown for a walk-in consultation, branch manager for notarized statements. I wrote next to each name the single request I would make. The cafeteria thinned and refilled. I stayed put. When the lobby printer freed up, I bought paper, printed the packet, and slid it into a manila folder from the gift shop. I bought a blue highlighter and traced only dates and dollar amounts. I drew slender arrows that a tired finger could follow. I stapled receipts behind the summaries so nothing could drift. I pressed my palm on the folder until it felt like a tool rather than a pile. Upstairs, Matilda slept more deeply, a little color returning. The monitor kept metronome time. I sat long enough for the rush in my blood to slow and match the steady green line. When the nurse came to chart vitals, I asked which documents the unit could provide in the morning. She pointed me to the desk for visiting policies, to the social worker for letters about care needs and guardianship options, and to the posted hours for a notary if Matilda wanted anything witnessed. I thanked her and went back down with a list and a purpose. I called the bank again to harden the perimeter. A second representative added a verbal password, enabled text alerts for any attempt to add an authorized user, and placed a temporary lock on new external transfers. He read each safeguard back. I initialed them in my notebook the way I initialed inspection punch lists before signing off a bridge. Belt, suspenders, and a hand on the rail. I emailed myself a memo titled Evidence Pack, Gary Spending and Absence. I attached the screenshots, the exported transaction list, the photo of my timeline, and the bank confirmations. I wrote a short paragraph at the top. On this date, while my daughter was admitted to intensive care, I documented these purchases and public activities by her spouse using funds from my account. I sent it to both my addresses and to an encrypted archive I keep for estate matters. Paper beats memory. Redundancy beats doubt. I sipped coffee that had cooled to the temperature of resolve and rehearsed boundaries. If he called, no arguments. One sentence only. All further communication by email. If he threatened court, I would request his attorney's name and send the packet. If he tried to appear on the unit, I would alert security and ask staff to enforce visitor rules. If he waved the children like a flag, I would let the timeline and the bank notices speak. If he cried, I would let the silence hold. After midnight, 2 more declines blinked in like buoys on a dark channel. West Side Hotel, Venice Restaurant. Both failed. I logged the times and drew lines back to earlier entries. He would feel the shift before he understood it. He would rage, then bargain, then threaten, then plead. Systems teach lessons that speeches cannot. I closed the folder and held it like a finished beam. The man on the yacht thought grief had made me soft. He forgot. Grief can make people exact about what matters. He thought kindness would keep me quiet. He forgot kindness. And consequences are neighbors. He thought the money would never stop because I loved my daughter. He forgot love. With a backbone, looks like signatures, timestamps, and a file that can stand on its own. I set alarms for morning, the bank's opening hour, the social worker's arrival, the period Dr. Rivera rounded, the walk-in window at the clinic. I wiped the table, folded the napkin, slid the chair back under the edge, and carried the folder upstairs. I tucked it inside my jacket where its weight sat against my heart. In Matilda's room, I rested my hand on her blanket and let the monitor's rhythm set mine. Dawn pressed a pale line across the hallway floor. My phone vibrated with a single text without greeting. What did you do? I studied the words until they shrank to their proper size. Then I answered with the only sentence he would get tonight. I protected my daughter. All further communication by email. I put the phone face down, took Matilda's hand when her eyes opened, and spoke the plan in a voice built for load-bearing truths. We are safe now. We document everything. We move forward together. Before breakfast service began, I reviewed the packet one more time with a builder's eye for weak joints. I trimmed a sentence that repeated a date, added a line that defined the account as mine alone, and inserted the exact language from the bank emails about revocation. I wrote a short cover note addressed to whom it may concern that fit on half a page and stated the request plainly. Enforce boundaries, prioritize patient safety, recognize documented financial misconduct, and direct all inquiries to written channels. I added a footer with my contact data and a header with the date and time, because headers carry authority. I tucked 2 spare copies into the folder for anyone who needed a piece of paper in hand to act. Then I closed the notebook and looked at the chapel doors again. I thought of Martha's quiet certainty, the way she believed in follow-through more than speeches, the way she would have approved of signatures and timestamps, and a calm line drawn in ink. Process is love wearing boots. Boundaries are love with a spine. I stood, slid the chair in again, and carried the file upstairs to the day that was waiting. No exceptions. The call hit without a hello, only panic shredding the line. What did you do, old man? My card just died. The yacht office is yelling. The hotel wants a deposit. Fix it. Now. I watched first light edge across the ICU blinds and kept my voice even. Gary, this is Harley. I protected my daughter. Speak calmly, or I hang up. He snapped back, high and brittle. You can't do this. I'm her husband. I have rights. I looked at Matilda sleeping, pale under the monitors, and answered with facts. Your rights end where her safety begins. He tried charm, the smile I could hear across the connection. You're misunderstanding, Harley. This week is networking. Deals happen here. I'll bring money back to the family. I opened my folder and read without raising my voice. Marina Del Rey, Yacht Charter, $15,000. Authorization ending 4/29. Posted yesterday at 2:14 p.m. I have the receipt, the merchant ID, and the timestamp. His laugh came tight and empty. So you snooped. Business has costs. Not everything is about you. I slid another page free. Rodeo Drive, 3,200, 10 days ago. Malibu tasting menu, 850, 3 days ago. Beverly Hills Auto Service, 2,400 last week, while my daughter was in treatment. I let the words line up like bolts in a tray. Bank statements show you drained another man's savings while your wife received chemotherapy. Your posts put you on a yacht while her labs were drawn. Admission times from Dr. Rivera match your charges to the minute, a timeline any judge can follow. He tried blame. She told me not to bother you. You were fragile after Martha died. I carried this family. I let the lie pass like exhaust and kept to the rails. You carried an open tab. When she needed help, you carried a camera. Wind and raised voices bled through his side of the call, a deckhand complaining about the decline. Gary slid to pity. You don't understand pressure. Investors expect a certain look. People judge. I let the quiet do the work, then set the boundary. People judge behavior. Mine is protecting my daughter. Yours is abandoning her with my money. He moved to threats. Restore the cards or I file for divorce and take Emma and Jack. I'm their father. Courts favor dads who can provide. You'll look like a bitter old man meddling. I opened the summary page written for this moment. Courts favor safety, stability, and proof. I have statements, screenshots, and a timeline built from your posts. I have hospital staff ready to document how rarely you showed. I have a restraining order draft for harassment and financial abuse. If you want court, we will welcome daylight. He went quiet, long enough for gulls and music to filter through, then swung to bargaining. Give me a bridge. 2 days. I'll sell the watch, cancel the car, come home tomorrow. We can be a family again. Matilda doesn't need this stress. My hand tightened until the cardboard creaked. Stress is what you created when you left her alone. Family is what you forfeited when you stopped showing up. He tried the soft voice he used to close Marks. I made mistakes. I panicked. I'm only human. I'll fix it if you just restore the cards. His tone snapped back to rage. Fine. If you want war, I'll smear you. I'll say you're controlling, unstable, obsessed with money, trying to steal my children. I pictured Emma's crayon sons taped to my fridge and answered like an engineer reading torque specs. If you lie, I answer with documents. If you harass, I file. If you show up here, I call security and the police. Hear me clearly. You are done using my resources, and you are done using my daughter's illness as cover. He reached for the last card. Matilda will forgive me. She always does. She needs me. You can't keep us apart. She is an adult, under medical care, surrounded by people who show up. If you want a future, you submit to boundaries in writing, you enter counseling, and you prove change over time. Today, you start by leaving us alone. He barked a laugh that tried to sound brave and landed small. You can't tell me to leave my own wife alone. Watch me. A door slammed on his end. The party noise dimmed. Panic returned unmasked. The charter wants a new card. The hotel wants a deposit. The restaurant is threatening to call the police over a declined tab. Harley, please, give me something. The words came in gasps now. The bluff deflated. I kept my voice steady so each syllable would land. Here is what you get: a taxi number, a reminder to call your own parents, the dignity of facing the cost of your choices without stealing from people you hurt. He tried one more angle. Think about the kids. They need a father. Don't take that from them. I thought about the kids when I canceled the cards, I said. I thought about them when I blocked access. I thought about them when I printed the receipts, because one day they will ask what happened, and they deserve dates and truth. You want to be a father? Start by not harming their mother. Silence settled, clean and final. I let it stand. At last he whispered like the tide going out. So that's it. You're cutting me off. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the floor. You chose champagne over chemotherapy. Now live with it. The words closed like a latch. On the monitor, Matilda's pulse held steady. In the phone, I heard only ocean and breath, then a dull thud, a glass set down too hard. He tried one last plea, hoarse and small, just enough to get back to shore. I let the request dissolve into the hum of the ICU. I blocked the number, wrote the time in my notebook, and slid the folder under my arm. When I returned to the bedside, Matilda's eyes were open, rimmed with tears that shone in the blue light. "Did you really do it?" she whispered. "Are we free?" I took her hand, felt its fragile heat, and gave her the only answer that matters when a storm finally breaks. Yes, the money is secure. The access is gone. The record is clear. Tomorrow we speak to an attorney, to the social worker, and to Dr. Rivera about documenting everything. Tonight, you sleep. You are safe. Across the glass, the city kept moving, indifferent to one man falling off a borrowed throne. Inside this room, a father said a line, a daughter believed it, and a family began to breathe again. The first ripple hit before dawn. By then, Gary's name was being whispered on a yacht deck where no music played. Guests who had clinked glasses with him an hour earlier were watching their drinks turn flat while the crew demanded payment. Every attempt to swipe his card brought the same sharp beep of rejection. Servers crossed their arms, crew members muttered about calling the police, and Gary's smooth grin melted into sweat. The men beside him stepped back as if distance could erase association. He had built his image on easy wealth and effortless charm, but when the bills came due, he had nothing. Humiliation does not announce itself. It lands quietly in the eyes of others. By sunrise, his reputation on that yacht was finished. The second ripple came in the weeks that followed. Divorce proceedings opened with the usual cold formality, but the evidence packet turned the tide before the first hearing ended. Screenshots of Gary's own posts, transaction records aligned with hospital admissions, bank statements showing his dependence on funds that were not his. Matilda's attorney laid it out with calm precision. Each photo, each dollar, each timestamp told the story better than any speech. Gary tried to counter with claims about business expenses, but his voice faltered every time the judge asked for invoices, receipts, or corroboration. Nothing came. When custody was raised, the judge did not linger. 2 children deserve stability, and stability is not found on the deck of a rented yacht while their mother fights for her life. Gary's threats dissolved under the weight of documented neglect and financial misconduct. Matilda was granted sole custody, with supervised visitation only if Gary complied with counseling and financial restitution. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably when that ruling was read. The man who once boasted about providing had nothing left to bargain with. His credit was gone, his access revoked, his reputation stained. He walked out of court, smaller than when he entered, his shoulders hunched, his phone buzzing with calls that would never be answered the same way again. The third ripple was quieter, but more profound. It came in Matilda's hospital room the evening after the judgment was finalized. She sat propped against her pillows, the weight of paperwork finally lifted. The folder of evidence lay closed on the table, no longer a burden to be reviewed, but a shield that had already done its work. She looked at me with eyes clear of fear for the first time in months. Her voice cracked, but not from weakness. "Dad, I thought I'd be alone forever. I thought when Gary left me that was the end of everything." I sat beside her and took her hand, the same way I had in those first fragile nights. "You were never alone," I said. "You had me, and you always will." Her grip tightened, and tears slipped down her face. Relief, not sorrow. The relief of a woman who no longer had to explain away absences, who no longer had to defend cruelty as pressure, who no longer had to wait for someone who would not come. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I can breathe again." Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it hums in the background, steady as a heartbeat monitor, marking the difference between fear and safety. That night, as machines ticked quietly around us, Matilda closed her eyes and slept, without clutching the blanket in worry. Outside, Los Angeles glittered with its usual indifference, but inside that hospital room, a family had been remade. Gary's downfall had started with a card decline and ended with the loss of everything he thought untouchable. What he left behind was not ruin, but space, for healing, for trust, for love that had never truly left. Spring arrived like a gentle promise, and Matilda met it step by step. Physical therapy first, short walks with a water bottle, and the stubborn will that carried her through chemo. The fog lifted in inches, appetite returned in careful spoons, and color crept back into her face. Dr. Rivera adjusted medications, celebrated platelets like victories, and reminded us recovery was a road. Matilda kept a notebook by the bed and wrote one strong line each day. "I finished the lap, I ate the soup, I am still here." On hard mornings, she read those lines aloud until courage sounded normal again. Therapy helped her stitch together what illness and betrayal had torn. A calm counselor named Denise guided sessions where Matilda practiced saying no without apology and yes without permission. She learned to name old patterns, to spot hooks disguised as duty, and to return guilt to its sender. Denise taught grounding, slow breath counts, and one question that changed everything. What would compassion choose next? Matilda built a small toolkit around that sentence and practiced until new choices felt like muscle memory. Remission arrived on a Tuesday, announced by a printout and Dr. Rivera's steady smile. The words settled over us like warm light. It did not erase scars, but it gave us direction. We celebrated with soup and a short walk among young leaves. Matilda pressed her hand over her heart, felt the beat that carried her, and promised to honor the body that kept going. Identity returned through ordinary tasks. She rebuilt a resume and added truths the world rarely lists: crisis communication, medical scheduling, resource navigation, endurance. A local agency offered a remote design contract. A friend sent a second client. She worked in blocks, took breaks on purpose, and closed the laptop after dinner. Her colors warmed, her copy softened, her layouts breathed. Clients noticed without knowing why. In Texas, the kids adapted with a speed that felt like grace. Emma stopped asking where her father was and started asking how to frost cupcakes for the fundraiser. Jack slept through the night again, no longer waiting for footsteps that never came. Homework returned to the kitchen table with pencils that actually had erasers. I handled school pickups when Matilda needed rest and taught small crafts in the garage where cedar and machine oil made hours steady. Emma sanded a birdhouse. Jack learned the patience of measuring twice. We made routines that signaled safety. Friday movie night with blankets and popcorn. Saturday pancakes everyone flipped at least once. Sunday walks to the farmer's market, where Emma counted tomatoes and Jack traded jokes with the kettle corn man. Matilda kept a calendar with green checks for easy days and blue dots for tougher ones. The Christmas cactus on the kitchen windowsill started as a rescue from a clearance rack the week she came home. It looked tired then, all angles and no bloom. We repotted it, set it near light, and watered with the patience healing requires. In December, it surprised us with a burst of pink that made the room feel like it was singing. New buds meant new chapters. Every bloom said the same quiet sentence: keep going. Old traditions returned with new meaning. We revived Martha's cornbread and taught the kids the secret of the crisp edge. Porch evenings came back with a flashlight star map. Emma braided holiday bread, weaving patience into every strand. Jack organized the tool drawers like a junior engineer, proud of order where there had been chaos. Work grew into purpose. Matilda mentored 2 younger designers recovering from burnout, sharing what balance looks like when you earn it the hard way. She joined a nonprofit board that helps patients manage paperwork during treatment and redesigned their forms so people answered fewer questions on their hardest days. At home, quiet pride replaced fear. Emma taped an A spelling test to the fridge next to Jack's drawing of a cardinal perched on the cactus. Matilda laughed easily now, a sound returning like a favorite song found on the radio. She wore her hair short and brave and looked like herself again. We kept watch without living in worry. Matilda scheduled monthly therapy, quarterly labs, and a standing coffee with a friend who pulled her into light whenever clouds gathered. When fatigue whispered, she answered with rest. When fear knocked, she answered with facts and a text to me that read simply, "Here." On the first day back at the kids' school, Matilda stood at the curb in the soft morning and waved as the bus pulled away. Her eyes shone not with tears, but with something steadier. She turned to me and said, "We are building ordinary days, and ordinary feels like a miracle." By winter, the house felt like a place inhabited by people who are safe. Books gathered on end tables. Emma practiced a solo for the holiday concert. Jack learned to whistle. To health, to home, to the courage that keeps choosing tomorrow. Matilda lifted her glass and added the line that belongs to her now: to a life we design on purpose. We added anchors to each week: a library stop on Thursdays, a silly dance while dinner finished, and a check-in where everyone named one good thing. The cactus kept time for us, pushing tiny buds whenever the house felt kind. Emma tutored a student, while Jack built a kite string holder in the garage. Most nights ended with Matilda whispering thank you to the room and meaning it quietly. Family took on a new meaning in the months that followed. It was no longer defined by a marriage certificate or the obligations of a title. It was the people who showed up, the ones who stayed when things got hard, the ones who brought soup instead of excuses, laughter instead of criticism. Sunday dinners became a tradition again, but this time around a table filled with friends who were steady and children who were safe. Emma and Jack set the places with care, knowing each meal was a sign that they belonged to something solid. Neighbors stopped by, friends from church brought desserts, and Matilda's colleagues dropped in with stories of projects and encouragement. The house was alive again, not with performance or appearances, but with love that had nothing to prove. In that warmth, Matilda discovered she could breathe. She learned that family is not about who claims you in public, but about who protects you in private. When Emma performed at the school recital, a row of supporters filled the front seats, cheering louder than anyone else. When Jack lost a tooth, 3 different people came with dollar bills tucked in envelopes. That was family. Chosen, present, deliberate. The wounds left by Gary's betrayal did not erase themselves, but they no longer defined the boundaries of her world. Instead, those scars became reminders of strength and of the people who truly mattered. For me, as her father, it became a quiet mission to hold on to the lesson carved into every difficult night. Love shows up. Respect is not a word, it is a verb. It is action. It is presence. It is the steady hand on the shoulder when fear creeps in. I promised myself that I would never again hesitate, never again assume tomorrow was guaranteed, never again let pride or grief silence the call to protect my own. I had missed signs once, but not anymore. Dignity meant living without delay, speaking truth when cruelty tried to disguise itself as tradition, and walking through every door my daughter needed me to walk through. Matilda changed her name back to Hudson, the name that carried her through childhood, the name Martha had whispered proudly at graduations and birthdays. The papers came in the mail one afternoon, and she held them with both hands as if reclaiming a part of herself that had been waiting all along. On her desk sat the small nameplate she had kept since her first job, polished now and bearing those words again: Matilda Hudson. It stood not just as identification, but as declaration. She was no longer the woman hidden under someone else's shadow. She was whole, independent, and seen. One final symbol remained, tucked in her dresser drawer. The wedding ring, once worn with hope, now sat alone on the wood grain. She left it there without ceremony, without bitterness, simply as a fact. That ring belonged to a chapter closed forever. In its place, she wore a silver bracelet Emma had made at school, strung with beads that spelled out the word brave. It jingled softly when she worked, a reminder that identity could be rebuilt and dignity could be restored. The story ended not with vengeance but with peace, around a dinner table filled with the people who mattered, in a home where laughter returned, with a father who finally understood that protection is not passive. It is daily, deliberate, and sacred. Love shows up, respect acts, and dignity is choosing never to hesitate again. If this story touched you, I invite you to take a moment and join our growing community. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need to hear it today. Your support helps bring more of these stories to light, stories where dignity and love stand firm in the face of betrayal. In the comments, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever seen betrayal hiding behind what was supposed to be love? What boundary did you set that changed everything for you and helped you reclaim your peace? Your words may be the encouragement someone else needs right now. Remember, this channel is about more than stories. It is about community, about resilience, about reminding one another that love shows up when it matters most. And if you are ready for more, stay tuned. Tomorrow we bring another powerful holiday season betrayal story you will not want to miss.